All right, great. Let's kick off then, Keith. I think we should get stuck into your story because you've got lots of great stuff there in your background and your journey that we want to bring out. So just introduce yourself there. Where are you from at the moment? Where are you living?
At the moment, we're my wife and I, Estelle and I, live at Yeppoon, just north of Rockhampton. A lovely seaside spot with the ideal climate. We're very, very fortunate, and God has supplied us with a lovely home. So situationally, we're really, really with it, mate. Health-wise, a different story. Learning to handle stuff, but it's all good. That's where we are, and we're almost going to be locals. I think it's in November this year we become locals because we will have been here 30 years. You're not classified as a local unless you've been here 30 years.
So you're in Yeppoon, been there 30 years?
Yep.
Okay, so you're on a farm out there, right?
Yeah.
A mixed farm, I think you called it.
Very, very mixed farm, yeah.
What does a mixed farm look like? What do you do on a mixed farm?
Well, in our situation, we had irrigation in the latter part of in the 60s onwards. We had irrigation, so it was getting fairly complex. We had agreements with some of Australia's top seed producing companies for providing them with hybrid sorghum, different specialist seeds, sunflower seeds. We had crossing blocks, utilising the genetics that are involved in that. Very, very similar to what Paul is using actually even today with the watermelons. So we call them crossing blocks. We had everything except sheep. I never actually ran sheep. For a short period of time, we did run a goat. He didn't last very long. He decided to attack Alan, our youngest son, and left him with a scar on his lip.
I'm imagining that he ended up on a spit.
He went to heaven, yeah.
I hope he tasted good. So it sounds like a bit of a training ground there for potentially for someone like Paul to grow up on then.
Oh, we were so blessed with Paul. It's very, very interesting. Education today classifies people in so many hard line, thou shalt obey type lines. Paul came home from high school one day and he was 15 years old and he was brokenhearted. He said, "Dad, I can't stand this anymore. All they're teaching me is they're teaching me now today how to fill in a dole form. And all my best mates have left. They're all going and doing things. And I'd like to come and farm with you." And that was the most beautiful thing I could have ever had happen to me as this lovely son that we've been so close to all those years, wanting to come and be a partnership with Mum and Dad. It didn't turn out real good all the time. We entered into with a partner. We entered into contracting cotton harvesting right from virtually Springshaw right through to Burke and even further south of Burke. There are some ups and downs in whether that was profitable or not, but we did have the incredible advantage of getting to know so many people who were loving and kind and generous and 110% Christian. I can't go on a lot about that, but Paul's dedication to Cornerstone and his place in it is empirical. It's still remembered by a lot of Cornerstoners. He's still running into them, still loved and admired by Cornerstone. Paul made that sacrifice and the returns out of that sacrifice have been unbelievable. Yep. So there's Paul entering into the story. The education system was obviously very, very wrong. Paul was not interested in history, much to my disappointment. Not terribly interested in geography. He loved maths. He could run circles around anybody, including his own teachers, on anything to do with mathematics. And it's still the case today, as we know.
Now, taking the story back a little, it's not always been fun and games and training on the farm. Though you've had some hard times. Do you want to just tell us about one of your biggest battles, the drought?
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. The 69 drought, it's incredible. It's so 50 years ago now. But we had a really dreadful set of circumstances where we decided that we would take our cattle by rail 200 kilometres to Yeppoon, where we offloaded the cattle at a reserve, and we had a terrible lot of circumstances there. I could go on for ages about the things that happened in that dreadful time. But basically, that was where we learned how to remember names, remember and appreciate locations. I learned to stop saying I've got a bad memory because it was so important to remember names and places. I suddenly developed a fantastic memory necessity there. We had a lot of experiences out of that, including the fact that when we arrived at Yeppoon to pastor really a blue ribbon church in Yeppoon, we knew all the back roads, we knew half of the 3/4 of the congregation. All of that turned out as an asset. That terrible experience turned into a marvellous asset that we carry through into even now.
Let's talk about that a little bit more, because you're seeming to sort of brush over it fairly quickly. But you were telling me that this is a farm that you guys had developed over 50 years.
Yeah.
Right. So this is something quite special, quite unique. In there, and I think you were saying your dad had worked on there too, right?
That's true.
He was. Tell us a bit about your dad and the land, because he's got quite a connection, right?
Yeah. Very important. This is that it was a 50-year, and my mother and father had owned that property for 50 years. And I came into the picture in 1938. I was born to my mother, who was 45 years old. And it was quite an extraordinary set of circumstances where my mum had to go to Campton, to Hillcrest Hospital, to give birth to me. And my dad was notified that mum was had given birth to me, and he broke the record. He drove 200 kilometres from Bangor to Rockhampton in 3 hours. In those days, that was a lunatic drive.
It was an important trip. Yep.
Very important. With the relationship with Dad, none of us is perfect, and we're in big trouble if we think we are. I think if we start to say we're a perfectionist, or anybody says that, we've got some rough roads ahead of us. But my dad was my best mate. Now, you've heard folks say that, but this was real, very real. I felt very, very secure in the love that my mother and my father showed me and demonstrated very clearly. One thought that comes to me is a memory of my dad would get up before daylight to go and get the cows. In other words, to collect dairy cows for our dairy. There would be up to 120 of those cows. Eventually, they are nearly all Guernsey cattle as well. A beautiful sight, an unforgettable sight. See 120 head of milkers driving them in the sun rising up a laneway ready to be milked. Beautiful. Now, if I was quick enough, I'd be able to catch Dad before he had his cup of tea or while he's having his cup of tea. I might even have a cup of tea with him, 4 o'clock in the morning, or around about that. And but if I missed Dad, I'd run into Mum and Dad's bedroom. It was a double bed. And the first thing, before I hugged Mum, I'd look at the wardrobe that had a large mirror on the wardrobe. And it would be misted and very, very, particularly in the foggy mornings. And this mist I'd look at it, and here's this carefully put 4 letters as ILMTA. And we had our secret, and we knew what that meant. And not many people know, but now they will.
Yeah, go on. Tell us, what does it stand? What does ILMTK stand for? What was this secret language you guys had?
I love my treasure kid. I love my treasure kid.
I love my treasure kid. Wow, and how did that make you feel, Keith?
A lot more secure, not cocky or anything like that, but it gave me the capacity. Every bloke on a planet needs to be able to look up to heaven and say, don't just think it, but say it, voice it. Let the devil know. And voice this one phrase, I am loved. And you watch the world change around you, mate. You watch the world change completely. I have used this unashamedly many, many times, and I've seen some extraordinary results from that very, very fact that get, especially blokes. I've had some ladies say it as well. I am loved, and it has a dramatic effect on the spiritual world. I'm sure of that. Like you guys to remember that.
Awesome. And that's exactly how your dad made you feel?
Yeah.
And that's how we can all feel about our big Heavenly Father, right? Who loves us even more so.
That's exactly right. You know, when Margaret was sharing Watto's discovering his capacity to love unfeignedly, to love without an agenda, to love without any sense of pretense, I'd have to say. That is one of the big things, and I'd love to share this. And I think we're staying on track here, Simon.
Mm-hmm.
And Simon, I think that comes right back to the love my father had for me.
Mm.
I felt settled in myself. I felt settled in my faith. My call from God tonight, is to be a settled person in my faith, in my trials and temptations. Watto, in those last days, and I understood it, what Margaret was trying to say, but that was why Watto could give us the biggest hugs ever, and they meant more and more to him and the people around him in his last days with us, because he found that he was settled in his faith. Guys, find yourself settled in your faith. You don't have to work for it. You just yield. You don't have to try. You know all that. You don't have to be a perfectionist. You don't have to climb ladders. You just find yourself accepting and believing that you are settled in your faith.
Now, speaking of love, talk to us a bit about your extraordinary wife. Who is she, and why would I say she's extraordinary?
Well, I am without any doubt. I don't care how wonderful your wives are, your spouses are. I don't care. Wallis, I got the best one. I landed up.
Come on, let's hear it. Why is it?
Well, I had been knocked around a bit. A couple of friends had let me down pretty seriously, actually, yeah, tricked me and deceived me, and I was feeling pretty darn lonely. Now, back in the 60s, when we had a ball at Thangool in the hall, the big big tin hall, big one, it was normal, like girls all sat around and waited for somebody to come along and pick them up for the gypsy tap, something like that. And the blokes did what the blokes did was sit outside, stand around, tell yarns, talk about farming, do all sorts of stuff like that, and occasionally slip down to the local pub and drink drinks that usually had vodka in them, because that good tip for you guys, vodka hides your breath. You don't smell, you see. Anyway, we let all that one go. I came into the hall, back into the hall, and I was full of bravado. And I said to one of my close friends, who later became my best man, and I looked around and I said, "Who's the best looking Sheila on the floor?" And he said, "Oh, that one over there. She done picked some cotton for me, and she is unbelievable. She can run circles around all the other girls, and she just goes like crazy all day long. She's a wonderful girl." "Thanks, mate. I'm going to take her home."
And what was her name, Keith?
Her name was Estelle.
Two guesses who you're with today.
Well, this is amazing. My darling was a little bit confused, and she objected weakly, saying, "But I came with my friends." And I said, "You don't worry about them. I'm going to take you home." And I said, "Where do you live?" And she said, "In such a flat," which I knew. So she succumbed, and we drove back to the flat, and we must have talked, I forget, I think it was about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and we talked about the rain, the weather, farming, stick picking, clearing, and all sorts of things. And I drove away knowing that that girl was going to become my wife, not because of what she could do, but because of what she is. An absolutely lovely soul.
Awesome. Absolutely awesome. And you guys have been through thick and thin, and you were telling me the story about when you had that really bad 8-year drought on your property, and you were telling me how she's just someone who just muscled in and helped out big time.
Absolutely, mate. Yeah, we it looked good. The neighbours' property came up for sale, and look, the obvious thing to do. We were fairly well cashed up, very well cashed up, in fact. And I thought it would be a natural thing to buy the neighbour out and enlarge our operations, which were reasonably large. And so we bought the property at something like 10.5%. And then Mr. Fraser and all those clever people decided that we had to have a recession. And for that section of the loan, not all of our bank debt, but that part of the loan actually crept up because we couldn't meet our interest and redemption. It got up to 23% interest.
23%. That's just, in today's terms, it just think absolutely incredible to even get your head around, isn't it?
We had no hope, mate. So that was when we went cotton picking to pay for the expensive hobby of farming.
Yeah, and something that really, I guess, amazed me, that stood out from your wife, is that just what she did for her part in terms of keeping everything going. You were telling me she's up early in the morning, she's making the sandwiches at before dawn almost.
Yeah.
For everyone to munch on during the day. Then she's actually out there in the fields and on the farm helping you guys out, doing all the daily farming stuff you needed to do. Then she'd come home, then she'd cook your dinner for everybody. Yeah. And then she'd be doing all the housework as well, right? Just is an amazing woman. This is why I think she's just absolutely mind-blowing, this woman that you found on the dance floor. It's incredible.
Well, she not only was a hard worker and smart, but Estelle would be operating one of the, I think it was 4 modules at one stage. Module builders are the big clamps that build the cotton up, and you tramp the cotton in this big cage and then lift the module builder, the frame off, and you leave a module, a module of cotton, right? Mm. And I'd love to come back to that sometime. But Estelle's modules, at the end of the day, were always the best modules left in the paddock. Because she worked so hard and consistently and knew what had to be done to make those perfect modules. Yeah.
Wow. Now, that's just absolutely amazing. It just blows my mind that the story about your wife and how hard she works, and basically a relationship that you and her have had for so long. It's just amazing. Now, I want to zoom forward a little bit to twins. Tell me about these twins that you guys ended up having, and there was one of them almost died. Tell us what happened. Tell us just very quickly, and sort of.
I'll do it as quick as I can, mate.
Yeah.
So, in 1964, we had a visit from a grandmother who came down from Mackay. Mackay. And this grandmother, we're having a cup of tea on my mother-in-law and Estelle's mum's veranda. And this grandmother said, "Oh, you might have twins." And I said, "Oh, no, Grandma, there's no basis for that at all. There are no twins on either side of the family," going on the biblical thing. And she said, "Yes, I was a twin, and my twin sister was born at stillbirth." And there's quite pause, and I just jokingly said, "Well, if we have twins, I'll blame you." And laughing about it. Mm. That night at midnight, Estelle woke me up from a deep sleep, hard working day, and she woke me up from a deep sleep and said, "Ring the hospital." And I thought, oh. And I quickly realised, being quite astute, even though I was half asleep, that Estelle was intimating that I should drive her to the hospital and ring the hospital to say that we were coming. Because this baby, no ultrasound, see, this baby was coming. And we drove 1 mile from home and we got a blowout in the driver's side rear wheel. Now, typically I didn't panic. I just calmly got out, jacked the car up. In an amazement, realised I'd forgotten to chock the wheels, and I watched the car roll off the jack with the rim on the ground. Mm. I cannot explain this. I went to the back of the car and I lifted that car up. It was a black Holden FC. I lifted it up and I put the wheel back on the rim, then drove into Billawheeler, where I was met by the matron and virtually told, in her terms, you may as well go home. You weren't allowed in that precinct in those days.
Hang on a minute. So let's just first pause on that. You picked up the car by yourself, not on any jack as it just rolled off, and you put the wheel back on. How do you explain that?
How can I? We read about these things happening. It does happen.
Yeah. It was another important trip, wasn't it? And that you had to get there.
Well, God knows, mate. Father knows. That's my biggest message tonight. Remember, Father knows. Yeah, I can't explain it, but it does happen.
Amazing. Now,
yes,
I'm gonna fast forward you again because we are running short on time.
Yeah.
Now we're gonna fast forward. So you had 2 more kids after that, two more boys, but you were saying to me that the twins growing up was quite an exhilarating experience. But let's zoom all the way forward to last year. What happened?
In the last year, we lost 5 family members, and I think it was something like 12 close friends in the last 12 months, less than 12 months. And included in that was our son Donald, who died at home. And there are a lot of very, very sad circumstances attached to Donald's death. Esther and I,
we don't need to go into those details. That's fine. But I guess I want to know. Tell us about how you going with that. How did it affect you?
Made me more determined than ever, mate, to fulfil whatever it is that God has for me. I realise that I have dreams for the Capricorn Coast, where we've been ministering in different ways for the last 30 years. We have a number of dreams for the Capricorn Coast. We have a number of dreams for specifically the Salvation Army on the Capricorn Coast. And we have a dream, a vision of a Christian-based higher education university that will teach young people, potential leaders, what they believe and why they believe those things, and be given the capacity to express those beliefs in clear and understandable terms. That's one of the big ones. Now, so my relationship, this quote I love is, your relationship with Christ is measured by your love of Scripture. We know every morning when we turn to the Scriptures, there's always a feast of a memorable, uncanny discussion points, belief points discussion. And sometimes we'll go for an hour or more, sometimes 2 hours, because we've been in the Word of God. And this is...
So Keith,
yeah.
Just want to bring you back a little bit to your son, Donald. So it's inspired you to really look at, how education can help our young people a lot more. What is it about that? What is it about Donald's death and this inspiration? What's the link? Why? What's driving you in there? What is it about the education?
Education.
As in terms of Donald, what is the link there? What's that link?
We have a very deep-seated understanding that we are always the product of our choices. Donald's choices were very sad. We, at one stage, had to go through the agony of virtually having him having a DVD and a violence order out against our own son.
Mm.
And that gave us a real understanding of the incredible sadness, the incredible pressure that is on a lot of people today out of domestic violence. And you're seeing miles of it on the TV anyway.
Yeah, and so so you're, I guess, feeling that there's a need, there's a lack, right, lacking in our society for people like your son to be able to make the right choices and to be educated enough to see other options. Is that what you're telling me?
I got you, Simon. Yeah, mate. Yeah. There's a cry out. Lots of people are saying, we're looking for closure. We're looking for closure. And there's no such thing as closure. You're looking for a recognition of reality.
And I understand that your other twin's not doing so well either, and this is really why you're fired up about finding alternatives in there. Now, look, so Keith, just to wrap up then, what would you like to leave the blokes with tonight? Just very quickly, what is it you'd like to leave with the blokes?
No pretense, mate. No pretense. Don't lie to your mates. Don't lie to yourself. Be transparent.